Hi, and thank you all for joining us today. We are broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 on the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM in New Orleans. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. And today, as always, we are broadcasting on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, which is 105.3 on the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM in beautiful New Orleans. Today, I'm super excited because I get to interview and talk to and be friends with Nathaniel J. Gillis. And he is a demonologist and a paranormal researcher. And today we're going to talk about ETs, poltergeists, shadow figures. Are they demonic deception, especially the UFO part, or divine messengers? It's a big, hot topic, and I'm super excited to welcome Nathaniel. Hey, Nathaniel.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on with you. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you. It's our pleasure. Our pleasure. So before we dig into the questions, for folks that don't know who you are and what you do, I'm going to step off for 30 seconds, a minute, and let you kind of explain who you are and your background, and then we can dig right in. So take it away.
So I am Nathaniel J. Gillis. I am a paranormal researcher, lecturer, and known primarily as a demonologist. Not that I believe what we're dealing with is horns and hooves, but I kind of study the darker nuances of the phenomenon as it relates to our species, what it does, and how it has manipulated us throughout history. Now, here lately, my centerpiece, what I've been researching, is called necronetics. It's the ritual doctrine of non-corporeal conception. We would call it hybridism. And so that's what I'm known for, and that's what I lecture on. I guess I'll share my origin story as if people haven't heard it in the past. But I grew up in a haunted house, and my dad was a part of the ministry of the church. And it was a difficult time because I realized that what I was experiencing did not quite fit the religious blueprint I was being taught. And so I kind of existed in this cognitive dissonance where I knew what I was experiencing was real, but I had no real frame of reference. I didn't know where to place it in church history. So that's what kind of got me into the study of demonology. And since then, I've kind of merged into ufology as it relates to our species in the UFO abduction phenomenon. So that's my spiel.
That sounds awesome. I'm kind of curious. You said you were raised in a haunted house, right?
Mm-hmm.
What was that like for you? Like, can you just dig into
Yeah.
that a little bit? I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, so I had never experienced any paranormal activity prior to seeing that home, but it all started when my parents decided to go to an open house. It was just across town. So I'm thinking, okay, so we get in there, and it was primarily empty. The house was. There was, like, matter of fact, the only thing that was in the house that related to just furnishings was the bed inside what would become my room. And so my father led me by the hand, introduced me to where I would be living for the next 5, 6 years, and said, take a look around, figure out where you're going to place everything that you own. And so I did. But I can still remember the way it smelled. There was this kind of stench in the atmosphere, and it wasn't, the byproduct of rotting or decomposing matter. I mean, the only thing that was in the room was very apparent. It was just a bed in the corner. So there wasn't anything decomposing, but I could smell decomp. It never made sense. It still doesn't to this day. But for some reason, I guess I felt compelled to look under the bed. I was a kid. I was always afraid of monsters under the bed. And so there I was on all fours, and I looked underneath the bed, and to my utter astonishment, there looked to have been a 6-year-old girl. She was a full-bodied apparition. She was wearing a white linen dress, had long black hair, beautiful complexion, beautiful little girl. And at first blush, I thought, okay, this must be a neighborhood kid, or the family's left. The house is for sale. Maybe the door was open. Somebody snuck in, is playing a prank. But sure enough, once I moved into the house itself, I went around and became friends with the neighborhood. She didn't belong in the house. She never lived there. Nobody knew who she was. So that's when I realized that there's two possibilities. Number one, I have to accept I'm mentally insane. Uh, or, there is something present that is supernatural. And if that's the case, I was in for it. And sure enough, I was.
Was that the only entity in the home, or were there others?
Well, this gets into my research. There are other archetypes of the entity. Like when I first moved in, it was only about a week afterwards, in the middle of the night, in the silence, I could hear something moving, walking on the wooden floors of the living room. And I thought my dad was up. And I looked at the time and I knew, okay, he doesn't get up until like 4:30 or 5, and it's 3 a.m. So I went out in the living room, nothing was there. And yet I could still, it's crazy because I'm not perceiving anything with my eyes, but I could hear, right? There's an acoustic resonance there where something was displaced, creaking. And so I would often go back to my room, try to fall asleep, but then the noise would get louder and closer.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would literally walk all the way up, seemingly walk all the way up to my door and then stop. And then I would feel this pervasive presence manifest in the room. And it was almost pulsating. It's almost like feeling someone else's heart beating away. And so that it kind of evolved. And so to answer your question specifically, I don't believe there were a multitude of entities. I believe there was a singular intelligence that was diversifying its identity in my eyes, going through different stages of incarnation. And it took me a long time, not just in my experience, but in my research to determine that, right? Anybody else, at least in my earlier research of my career, I would have done that, right? I'd have said, okay, well, that's a shadow figure. That's another field. That's another intelligence. That's an apparition. Well, that's apparitional theory. It must be a haunting. I mean, even to the extent, my friend, that I would wake up in the middle of the night and I could hear disembodied voices communicating to each other just above my head.
Oh, wow.
So I had, a series of incarnations, but I do believe it was a singular intelligence that was demonstrating a unique pathology in the phenomenon to where it's not multitudes of entities. It's one intelligence
Ah,
that's incarnating as various archetypes. And if I may, that's what we're seeing right now in the field. With malevolent hauntings, we're seeing UFO abductions. With the UFO abductions, we're seeing apparitions and apports. And so I think one of the ways to really interpret the phenomenology behind it all is to quit looking at terms, move beyond the archetypes, and ask ourselves what's actually going on.
so when did you start making that connection between
Mhm.
UFOs and the demonic? Like at what juncture did you start to piece that?
So I had already bled through all of the literature I could find on Jewish demonology, Catholic demonology, Gershom Scholem's book on Jewish mysticism. And it was almost as if I was reading something and I wasn't really reading the words, I was reading the author. And I was communicating not just with the person that penned the words, but the actual phenomenon itself. And I started looking, like one of the very first books, and I recommend everybody buying this, is Eros and Evil by R.E.L. Masters. He's deceased now. But it was about the sexual pathology of the demonic. And that's when I started noticing this behavioral pattern over and over again, where alleged demons, alleged entities would abduct witches, practitioners, and the experiencers themselves would think that they were copulating with demons and corpses, and yet there was almost like this kind of frequency that fuzzed in and out. And by the time they realized what was going on, they were being poked and prodded by metallic objects
Mm.
that were shaped in, I'm trying to skirt around this, that were tailored to the measurements of a man. So literally, the phenomenon was giving them a theatrical performance that was appealing to their senses. This is what it is. This is what I'm doing. And more importantly, these are the rules they play by. And yet, when they truly realized what was occurring, it was something completely different. And so that's when I realized that whatever we were dealing with often blinds us with our own vision and appeals to the archetypes we believe in, not in the sense that they become that to us. Their pathology is the same. That's when I
Right.
realized, okay, these appear to be UFO abductions, and much less within the framework of horns and hooves. Now, I need to kind of, I guess, extrapolate that a little bit. What I'm suggesting here is not that aliens are demons or demons are aliens. I'm looking at something beyond the veil that has the ability to do everything it wants to do. That's why the sexual pathology is the same. That's why hybridism is the same. That's why right now on the field, we have necromancers contacting extraterrestrials, and then extraterrestrials pointing them back to necromancy. So the source is the same. The proto-intelligence is the same. It's just manifesting as different archetypes.
Now, are these forces, these demonic forces, are they very much in the same light as biblical ones? What are we dealing with? And I've watched a lot of your interviews in the past, and I know it's kind of difficult to define them, but what do you think they are? Is it a biblical demon?
It is, but not in terms of Western scholarship. Especially in the field, I keep hearing people say, okay, they're angels or fallen angels, and they appeal to um, post-biblical writings that try to go back and retroactively, using revisionist history, say, well, of course, that's what a demon was in biblical antiquity. So I appeal to a more ancient tradition, and that is consciousness. It wasn't too long ago that our archaeologists here in the States uncovered ritual bowls that were written in Ugaritic, ritual bowls, and apotropaic different incantations designed to ward off what we would call demons today. And so one of the terms that was employed in Ugaritic was malakuma. And they believed it had a dual meaning. They believed them to be demons, evil spirits, but it also meant deceased ancestors. And so that term was kind of, I guess it was reorchestrated, reinterpreted back into Hebrew theology as Malek, Malakim.
Right.
There's a linguistic lineage in there. So Malakuma, Malakim. And so then you see how they collapse both concepts into one teaching, and that is that the deceased ancestor can be a demon. And when that's deceased and they're demonic, then you become a fallen angel. Very weird. It's, again, even the term fallen in biblical antiquity was often described to people that died. So you start to see this emerging, I guess, tradition from which all of demonology stems. That's why in early Jewish mysticism, people like one guy's name's Rabbi Eleazar in the Pirkei Avot, or the traditions of the elders, said that evil people die and become demons.
Ah.
Then
Do you
Mhm.
do you believe that to be true? Do you think that these
It points to that, and we'll go into that here in a second. And
yeah,
it's profound. I mean, the implications are pretty game changing in my mind. But yeah, so that's where you get kind of the Nephilim and the term Rephaim, and even another fascinating Ugaritic term is Repiumai, found in another ritual bowl in Ugaritic literature, and that kind of lets us know where they were, what they thought Rephaim or Repiumai were. Again, we're dealing with dead people, deceased individuals that had kind of hacked reality. And their theology was that once these individuals died, they were trying to come back into this dimension. And so, in order to do that, what did they have to do? They had to replicate. Now we get into the ritual doctrine of a non corporeal conception. So now so kind of to dive deeper for a fleeting moment, that's why in the New Testament, when you have angels, like specifically when Apostle Peter, was believed to have died by his family. They believed he was martyred. In the King James Version, it says that he knocks on their door, they look through the peephole, and they see Peter, but they believe it to be his angel. Why? Because again, they're pointing their finger. They're pointing their finger at the fact that they believe that the angelic was some form of consciousness, literally within. Now, this gets back to the Atreus epic where it says that the ghost of a man is made from the flesh of a god.
Mm.
And to kind of really kind of nestle this into a point here, if I may, now we get into why the witch of Endor had conjured up the ghost of Samuel. And in the Hebrew language, she said it's an Elohim. Why? Because he had died and became something he never was in life. So what we're dealing with the demonic, at least in my perspective, is some form of liminal consciousness that has survived bodily death in the only way it can further its existence and facilitate what I call its disability of being without being a being. It seeks form. It seeks an image to possess. That leads us into necronetics, the ritual doctrine of non-corporeal.
Is that so that this entity, this being, could carry out its wickedness on Earth? Like, what's the end game for it?
So this is where necromancy plays such a significant role. It's not just to possess people. First of all, we need to understand this is what I was looking at in the pathology of possession throughout the years, right? I became no longer satisfied with the Catholic version of it. I mean, we have entities that have a language preference, they have memories, they have belief systems. You know, in some of the Jewish literature and the Dibuk phenomenon, you would have entities that you would have a Muslim man possessing the avatar of a Jewish man. And so when the Jewish rabbi would go and try to perform an exorcism, the entity would say, I don't believe in that. Go get a Sufi. That's my religious tradition. And then the exorcism is performed by a Muslim cleric, successfully ejected the entity. Now, Catholicism will say that they're all lying, until they tell the truth, until it lines up with the Catholic belief. And then, they're telling the truth now. And so I'm not frowning, I guess I am, but I'm not like trying to throw anything at them and be hypercritical here. But I'm saying in terms of their pathology, I think that something is going on that's far deeper than just what we've seen in Hollywood and on the screen, right? It's not just horns and hooves. Literally, and I mean this literally, possession to us is pregnancy to them. And there are cases where these entities began with possession and ended with pregnancy. Literal fetus in the womb gestation of a biological avatar. What that means, it's fascinating. What that means is that ancient demonology is not the same as modern demonology. It's not static. They're not monolithic in their pathology, right? What they're doing is they're evolving as well. And it's important, and I think that religious tradition has done profound damage to the field of demonology because they say, okay, well, yeah, it's the same entities we're dealing with in antiquity. And it's like, okay, but now they have bodies. How? And even in ufology, there have been researchers that have tried to connect the two, but they can't. They're stuck in the Book of Enoch. And these entities died, now they're wandering the earth. It's like, okay, but if they're purely spiritual, here's another problem. How are they leaving secretions on incubi victims? They're not. So whatever we're dealing with, I do believe, again, we're a species of liminal practitioners. And I'm going to have to flesh that out too, where I'm starting to pick up nuances of ritual magic being employed. To the extent, my friend, that sigils are present. Demons don't use sigils, practitioners do. So that kind of further opens the can of worms to where we realize, like at least myself, demonology is it needs to evolve if we're going to even begin to have the conversation with ufology. That has to happen.
So what is accounting for and this to me ties all together, for what we're seeing in the music industry and Hollywood with their demonic rituals being, I mean, Lady Gaga was just at a concert performing ritual satanic practices on stage. And it was Burning Man, I believe. So, like, why is it the same as what you're talking about? Is that demonic entity the same as what these folks are openly and blatantly practicing?
It goes even deeper than that. And it's not just Lady Gaga and other artists. I mean, even our own federal government
Yeah.
is now literally structuring the foundation of their aerospace programs on performing rituals
Are
for
you talking
certain entities.
are you talking about the development of like psionics programs and things, or?
Oh, well, yeah, that as well. But in one of Diana Walsh Pasuka's recent interviews, I think it was with Sean Ryan, she talks about how she went to a rocket launch and talking to different people, and then and talking to them, they were talking about how that at one point they were taking Barack Obama to these rocket launches and having him stand in a circle and look in a certain direction. And when she asked, what's the point of all that? And they said, we're doing this to honor our sponsors. So literally, at one point in history, we had Jack Parsons and JPL and Aleister Crowley and all these other practitioners that are contacting NHI and then literally furthering their scientific method. And a lot of people thought that was it, right? Case closed. That's not the case at all. Literally in the 21st century, 2025, they're still doing that. And so it's not just the scientific method that they're employing. It's quite literally, we're getting something from the other for a price at a cost. We got to perform certain rituals. Why? Is it possible that, and this is some of the Collins Elite research, that there are practitioners of the occult within our federal government that are, and I've been told this personally by people who would know, that now they're still doing it
Yeah.
today, where they're even to the extent of ritual sacrifice in order to further the scientific method. And so, yeah, it goes way beyond Lady Gaga. It's quite literally, we have people that are in covenant with NHI,
Yeah.
and they're willing to do whatever they can to get that next fix of technology.
So, gosh, I have so many questions. So, let's start with this. The folks that are doing this deliberately within the government, in Hollywood, wherever,
Mhm.
is there a communication and awareness with this demonic consciousness? Like, do they know? Is there like a Bob Dylan payoff? You sell your soul to the devil and you get fame. I mean, he wrote a song about that, obviously, for folks that might be wondering. But like, I'm trying to understand, are they communicating with these entities, and is there an awareness of what they're doing?
I think it's twofold. Number one, I think that they realize where we are at as a species. We are not the apex predator. There's something out there that transcends space time that can literally peel you out of your own body at will,
Oh,
can take you, interrupt your consciousness to the point where, and I've had one of these cases myself, where the individual's reading a book, looks at the clock, it's 11:30, in the same stream of consciousness, looks back up and it's 3 in the morning.
oh,
No interruption. They take people, they perform rituals on them, sometimes out of body. And I think that our government knows this. And one theory proposed by Nick Redford in his book, The Final Events, which is worth considering, is that the members of our government that are conjuring these entities, that are performing these rituals, are doing so because, in theory, the others may give us technology that we can use against them, as if they're going to mess up and say, oopsie, here you get, you know what I mean? And no, it doesn't make sense. But I think that goes to show you where their heads are in relation to them and how superior they are to our species, where it's like, okay, maybe they'll pity us. And in that moment of them making a mistake, we can weaponize it against them. Um, and also, I think that even though they realize and they somewhat understand the danger with these entities, I don't believe they fully appreciate it, because the problem is that the phenomenon, in diversifying its identity, one of the reasons it does that is because it's trying to make us believe it follows certain pathologies and certain rules. And I've noticed this in incubi cases where it's the husband manifesting to the wife, and so she applies husband rules. I'm intimate with my husband. I'll be intimate with him. And then at the very end of it, when the phenomenon decides to switch archetypes or pull the mask off, they're left realizing that the entire situation was designed to conjure them into a position of vulnerability, using the archetype to moderate their behavior. I'm loving, right? I'm benevolent. And sometimes it is. But there have been times, right, where it's not Dear Edna, it's not Uncle Ted, and even, dare I say, it's not even extraterrestrial. It's something that we can't really conceptualize. And so I think that kind of articulates our position right now in relation to the others, is that it's all about them. I mean, I have a researcher right now, one of my mentors in England, who the phenomenon incarnated as an extraterrestrial to him and was communicating to him through a psychic as a guide. Same time frame. And while he was entertaining these archetypes, which he's like I am, we kind of were on the same page here. He knows, right? There's something else there. There's something else wearing these archetypes as a mask. And so finally, in the middle of filming with a TV show, he's in the woods looking at this tree at nighttime. He was about to pack all of their equipment up and leave because there was no manifestation occurring.
Mm-hmm.
There was a wind that came through, and the hair on the back of their neck stood up, and they realized they're here. And from the darkness and multiple voices, they demanded worship. Bow down and worship us. So if we want to know the source of the phenomenon, what it is appearing as is an apex predator that doesn't kill everybody, but has absolutely taken the lives of some. And at the end of the day, it thinks it's a superior species. It demands worship. And in order to get what we want from it, we have to perform their rituals.
Oh.
That, my friend, is weird. That's strange. And we can get into some of the centralization that's occurring to kind of link it more with the demonic. I just have to stress that once we do that, people need to realize that the horns and hooves archetype is just another masquerade that we entertain because we think holy water works. We think if I put, I got a cross on my neck, right? We think if I have the cross, everything's fine. And I've heard that. I grew up hearing that. The threshold covenant's a big one. They can't do it. It's a threshold covenant. And that's fine in theory. But it did profound damage to me as an experiencer growing up, right? I'm going to church thinking the same thing. And then waking up in the middle of the night to clouds of darkness hovering in the corner of my room, going into looping nightmares of someone unaliving themselves to where I couldn't wake up. It would not let me wake up. And then when I did, that's when the paranormal activity would occur. So that's my little spiel. That's where I'm at.
Wow. I can't help but think, is this, I'm trying to piece together, is this consciousness, this darkness, is this life form from another planet? Or is it more like an angel's demon god versus, I can't fathom where it would be from.
Oh, I think it's interdimensional. Not interdimensional. I mean, it's that too, but it's interdimensional. What do I mean by that? In the Traces epic, it says that the ghost of a man is made from the flesh of a god.
Right.
So you take that and you start to ask yourself, is it possible that the soul itself is a different species than the body it inhabits. Then you extrapolate that into the Elohim. It's a completely different species than the entity, the person they were in life. So whatever that is, the angelic, the fallen angel, whatever that is, we can't really conceptualize. It's something other. It's something mutated. It's in some ways evolved. And so what I'm looking at least my model of the phenomenon in necronetics, is that at least some of the entities we're encountering are former practitioners in life. And what they're doing is prolonging their existence by self-replicating through wombs and rituals. I'm getting now to the point now where I'm having experiencers that thought they were abducted by aliens that are waking up with sigils on their bodies. Sigils that are gender specific and that are actually in line with practitioners who wrote about sigilization in the occult. And so what it appears as is, even in disclosure, it's psionic, it's a CE5, JPL, all of that, it's all tied to ritual magic. And what I'm learning now, at least in my research, is that so is the abduction phenomenon. What they're doing is they're abducting people, performing ritual magic on them, and, hey, I'm an alien. Go ahead. And then they're waking up. And this research, and I'm telling you, if I'm doing this research, our government is too. And I ramble a lot. So yeah, I think it's relevant.
Goodness, go right ahead. I just have so many questions swirling around my brain. So you'll have to forgive me. I'm trying to get to them all as they're popping in and out. I think for the folks that are watching, we should define some of the verbiage that you, because I mean, Nathaniel, what you're doing is so scholarly and so beyond the typical, like, I've interviewed folks that were demonologists and this type of, and it's honestly like they're here and you're here. So because your research and all your work just seems very scholarly to me, like you really are doing the right research. So let's break down. So a sigil, tell folks, like I saw a video recently of some sigils that were left on someone who was abducted. And I even have the little video in case, we wanted to bring it up, but it was in the shape of a cross somewhere, an X. So is this what you're talking about? And like,
was that on my account?
No, I don't think so. Let me open the link real quick. It's a YouTube. No, it's actually on the History Channel. Let me just pull it up. It's a short. Let me just pull it up real quick, and maybe you could.
One of my. Okay.
2017, Seb Tock and her boyfriend have just moved to Arapahoe, North Carolina. The two are still unpacking when suddenly Seb feels what she describes as a bug bite on her rear. And when she looks,
there we go. Yeah. Okay.
Wondering, how did this red X show up on the left cheek of your tush?
9 dots.
Did you see that one?
I didn't, but yeah. So
let me just finish it. Want me to finish it real quick or no?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. I'd love to see it.
Arranged on her skin in a perfect X formation. The mark doesn't itch, and upon running her fingers over it, Seb feels neither a raise nor indentation.
I couldn't feel it. I decided, let's just ignore this. We're going to pretend like this never even happened.
9 days after discovering those first marks, Seb says she was startled awake by a rush of disturbing memory fragments, believing them to be from the night before she recalled an unearthly encounter.
I was lying on this bed that resembled a hospital bed. And I turned my head around, and standing right behind me, right here, just inches from me, was a gray.
By gray, Seb is referring to the infamous gray aliens, intergalactic antagonist in many alien abduction accounts.
We locked eyes, and ding, I'm back in my bedroom.
Fearing that these visions weren't just a dream, Seb checks the mirror and discovers a second X mark has appeared on her backside, directly across from the original. The marks lasted around 3 weeks before fading from her skin.
I was so afraid and so confused. There was no logical explanation for this.
Seb's story may sound incredible, But Mindy Tautfest of the Mutual UFO Network, or MUFON, says it's more common than you might think.
Following an abduction encounter, people can walk away with all kinds of strange markings, including bruising, scratches, all the way up to implants.
For instance, in October 1973, 2 fishermen were allegedly abducted by a hovering craft, subjected to physical examination, and returned with small punctures in their skin. It's because of these punctures, not unlike Seb's marks in size and shape, that their abduction story has been called one of the most credible in history.
Now, I wanted to I heard you talk about these sigils before. Is this what you're talking about?
Yeah, some of them do appear to be left from experiments of medical devices. The more supernatural ones are very much more disturbing. One of the cases that I'm working on now is with one of Dr. Carla Turner's old experiencers. She's deceased now, both Dr. Turner and this abductee, but I'm talking to her son. And Dr. Turner's research was rapidly evolving before these entities took her out. And one of the cases that she was working on was an experiencer who thought that she was being taken by NHI or aliens specifically. And then when she was returned, she would be covered in sigils from head to toe.
Oh,
And the term demonic was thrown around because she wrote, okay, this is not just medical experiments. There's something ritualistic going on. And so one of the alphabets that they discovered it was Theban, which goes back to medieval sorcery. And one of my cases, and people are going to watch this and say, okay, I'm saying it over and over again because they always watch my interviews. But you know what? For the sake of brevity and being verbose, I had done work with an experiencer and his family where his father was out of body meeting his guides, and there's another archetype, just like the extraterrestrial.
mm-hmm.
And it was in a ship, just like an abduction, and they're flanking him on the left and right sides. And that's when he's looking at them. He starts to realize, okay, these are beings that want to appear as my guides. They're not really my guides at all. They don't have my best interest in mind. That's when they shape shifted into something inhuman. He goes back into his body and has a massive heart attack as they're trying to revive him, which they did. Well, this is very disturbing. While they were looking at him tearing his shirt off, he's burning. You could see these red marks that are emerging from underneath his skin to the surface. And these entities had carved subdermal sigils, not into him, but out of him. And people don't realize that these beings are writing into abductees. They're carving into them. And so some of them are actually manifesting from, I believe, from the soul to the surface of the skin. And then by the time MUFON goes in, man, it looks like one of those, right? Oh, and that's not really what's happening in many cases. It's literally a supernatural event. And I'm to the point now in my research where I'm discovering sigils that are gender specific. That literally, like, okay, because to answer your question, let's kind of back up and contextualize this. A sigil is the energetic signature of an entity,
Mm-hmm.
of a demon, and sometimes a practitioner. But out of those two categories, only a practitioner employs them. What does that do with the horns and hooves hypothesis?
Mm-hmm.
I thought we're dealing with demons, right? And yet they're using sigils. And so I think that once we start to realize that, it starts to show us where we are with the phenomenon, is that if they are doing this to individuals out of body, and if these same entities are somewhere in the afterlife,
Mm-hmm.
now we're looking at a species that perhaps formerly human practitioners. And mind I say this, that with this specific case study, this woman, the one of Dr. Turner's, she was covered head to toe in Theban alphabet, but the alphabet, the sigils only stayed for 3 days.
Uh-huh.
This is where you get into Austin Osman Sparr's research as an occultist. It's going to blow your mind. He has 3 stages of sigilization when it comes to skin. The body absorbs the sigil. That's a part of it. That's why it's going from underneath the skin. It's absorbing. The body's absorbing it. Then it's activating them. The sigil moves to the surface of the skin. And then after a period of absorption and of activation, it ejects it. It purges the sigil from the skin. And that's when they disappear. So what is occurring, in order to have the proper context, it needs to be looked at through the lens of occultism.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reason people have missed that nuance is either they don't know enough about it, because there's plenty of intelligent people out there, right? I think if they had that head knowledge, they would have said the same thing. It's just they don't. And then plus you see programs on television, everybody's like, okay, it's got to be extraterrestrials. It's like, well, hold on a minute. We have to have a discussion, because I know right now, like there's things I can say, there's things I can't. But what I can tell you is that even in hybridism, even in incubi encounters and some of the UFO abduction phenomena where the missing fetus syndrome is present, it's present with secretions from a body and with sigils on the skin. What's going on here? So now if they are demons, then we have to say, okay, then they're flesh and blood. And if they are flesh and blood, and then if they're demons, then they have to have secretions, because we're having cases where secretions and sigils are on the same victim at the same time.
So
None of that fits the demonic model.
When you say secretions, what type of secretions are we talking about?
Semen.
Oh, primarily?
Mm-hmm. And what's so crazy about this is it gets very dark quickly, is it's the same stuff we saw with Montague Summers' research, where in Sistrari's research as well, where they believe that there was some kind of necromancy being performed because the semen that they were collecting, semen samples, were accompanied with sigils on the skin and sometimes underneath the eyelids of the experiencer. And so both of those together, it led them to believe that, this is necronetics, that either the semen was taken from a recently deceased man,
Oh, good Lord.
or the body that the phenomenon was inhabiting was a corpse.
That's going to be hard for a lot of people to wrap their head around that. So I mean, I'm trying to process it, and like I said, I've watched some of your videos, and I still can't fully comprehend a world where this is happening. So, because it goes against, and it's cognitive dissonance, I'm sure, but it goes against everything that we've been taught about good and evil and free will and
Yep.
that type of thing. So first I want to ask you, do you believe that there are ETs and aliens and from other planets that are not part of this demonic realm?
I think that there is other life out there, but at least and they may even be here and be benevolent, like if they're really truly extraterrestrial. But there does seem to be an intelligence that mimics the extraterrestrial that is doing this, and we have cases after case of it where, okay, I'm abducted, that's an extraterrestrial, and then we see an apparition of a dead person there at the same time, or we see Bigfoot, or they're guides too, and there are some cases where, and you see, if you look at the pathology behind even sexual pathology, they're archetypes. In the incubi literature, and we're going to get to another chapter of this that'll kind of really break down the phenomenology behind the mask. But in case studies of incubi, where it's not just the husband, right, but it's wanting to blend into that archetype, right? It's wanting you to believe in it. And something that I and other researchers have been working with or looking at is that the more you believe in that archetype in real time, in what I call interface events, the more you believe in that archetype, I believe it's extraterrestrial, the more power you're giving to the proto-intelligence wearing that mask. Now, how can we understand the phenomenology behind it? There's one of the more pattern confirming evidences out there, and it includes the fact that the phenomenon wants to be seen. And this will kind of really define the CE5 movement and psionics. But with respect to incubi entities, there are times and cases where, like one case I had, where the woman is in bed and she said that her husband walks to the left of her. She sees what she thinks her husband, the corner of her eye and her peripheral vision. And then she observes the entity. And in observing the entity, it looks just like her husband. They copulate. And afterwards, he positions himself again on the side of the bed where he was prior. And so now he's peripheral out of this corner of her eye. So she's looking at him like this and then looking this way. And then finally, she told me that she's looking at him again and she realizes the physiognomy, the facial structure. It's there. But there were certain tweaks about it that did not fit who she knew to be her husband. And this gets to a very profound pathology. And that is that the entity started to lose its shape. And so the pathology that I'm referring to is the fact that sometimes the phenomenon wants to be observed. Now, in quantum mechanics, we call that the observer effect. Where the phenomenon we are observing changes when the phenomenon is observed. So what I'm suggesting is that the phenomenon is seeking to be seen so it can structure itself according to the archetypes we as a species would understand. Deep. What that means, okay, yeah. So my point here is that there are cases like one of Dr. Turner's cases where these people on a highway, they see a UFO, and their family in a car. I think it was 2 out of 5, or I forget the number here. But some of them didn't even see the UFO. Others passing them on the highway didn't see the UFO. But those who did couldn't agree on what it looked like. Different lights, different shape. Why? Because what's happening, and this is called the observer effect, what's happening is when the phenomenon is observed, we, by observing it, are collapsing different versions of the same intelligence. This is why, and I had this, one of my good friends was Paul St. Clair. He had a case study. And actually, I think it was, and he talks about this. It's fascinating that there was a mother and a daughter that were in their house at nighttime. They're looking out the window and they see an entity staring at them. When they asked the wife what it looked like, she said it looked like a gray. When they asked the daughter what it was a demon. So we're looking at, quite literally, and this is where I'm going, is that there's points where the phenomenon seeks to be seen.
Yeah, I mean, you hear about that, with crimes too. So, like, there'll be a crime committed, and 4 people will see it, 3 people will have different opinions.
Yeah.
Same kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting, it gets back to the idea that there's a difference between manifestation and incarnation, where the phenomenon will manifest, but when it incarnates, it seeks to be observed because it uses the observer effect to construct its archetype. And even in like some of lamb magic with practitioners, when they're inducing themselves into trances, they're taught to stare into lamb's eyes. Same thing with incubi entities. And I do believe that a part of what we're dealing with is structuring its own manifestation in this world based upon human perception and consciousness. When we look away from it, it changes. When we look right at it, it's something. Yeah.
I get that. Yep. I completely can get that. Because, I mean, even Einstein talked about that spooky action at a distance kind of,
Yeah.
thing.
Awesome stuff.
Awesome stuff for sure. Okay, so I want to ask you personally, do you believe in God?
I do.
Let's just talk about that for a minute, if you don't mind. If
No.
it's not too personal.
I believe in a creator. I
Yeah.
have an issue with human suffering. I mean, I know the philosophy behind the arguments against it for that. A lot of it is, it's a struggle. You know, I grew up in church, and then when you read about cases of people who were in the middle of being baptized and they're swept away in an undercurrent and they die,
Right.
the only reason they died is because they wanted to make their life right. It's difficult.
Yeah.
And there are things that I struggle with personally. But in terms of the phenomenon, I should say this: I do believe in creation. I don't believe that we are the byproduct of mindless, unguided processes. But at the same time, whatever we're dealing with seems to just completely bypass what traditional religiosity would teach.
Yeah.
You know, like in we only need a handful of cases where they just say they ignore it before we actually have to have the difficult conversation of saying, okay, how much of this is propaganda by the phenomenon, right? To make us believe they won't do one thing to us or they'll obey this. You know, like in hauntology, it was always the cross, 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 cross until you have something that removes the cross off the door frame.
Yeah.
Or what, like the case of one of my buddies is, you know, placing a vial of holy water in the most haunted room in the house and watching the entity in real time siphon it down to nothing.
Jeez.
Sinister Abimino throwing holy water and holding up a cross to a demon that literally scoffed at him and just continued walking. Cases like that are replete, they're everywhere. And I think that a part of the problem religion isn't really answering all of this is because it's holding to dogma, it's holding to just beliefs that aren't really backed up by the data. And I think that to further our understanding, we have to be honest with it. I mean, it's not just us. Even with occultists, you know, they say, "Okay, I'm going to draw a circle of salt around the entity. They can't touch me." We know that's not true. Even that, my friend, may be an archetype where the phenomenon is saying, "Okay, if you do what I want you to do, I won't hurt you." And what we're realizing is that's not true. And now this gets back into archetypology, where there's, in my mind, in my research in necronetics, there's a difference between the proto-intelligence and the archetype, the mask. And so what in the longest time when I would do investigations, I would right conceptual, oh, that's horns and hooves, that's a demon, right? And so I would, oh, it's a demon, blah, 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 blah. Run on there, guns ablaze, and I'm your huckleberry, that kind of thing. And only to find out there's something else there. What's that? And so I would always think that they're co-present, right? Oh, they're co-present together. Oh my God, right? We'll leave that one alone. We'll go after this, right? We'll document that. And then I started realizing and going back and forth in case studies, investigations, to actually reading the books behind me. Wait a minute, they're not co-present. One's wearing the archetype of the other. And people don't understand that. You catch it? I saw it.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is why, and this is the danger of people who, you know, they're made famous by people who also don't understand this. And so, like for instance, you have Ed Ray Warren, right? They're in the haunting. What is it in Harrisville, Rhode Island, the Conjuring House? They're thinking they're entertaining one entity or many, but they're this way. They're kind of lower. And then, right, watch this. They go into a séance, right? And now they're no longer being courted by the archetype. Something else comes in. Well, can I suggest this? If they're not co-present, the phenomenon was wearing the mask of the other lower entities. And then when it got them in a vulnerable position, I got chills. I can feel it's very weird.
Yeah.
When they were in a vulnerable position, the phenomenon said, "We're not co-present. I'm wearing the other as an avatar," and pulled the mask off. Boxed up the mother, threw her against the wall. That's when they realized, oh my God, this was something completely different than what we thought it was. And so that's why I'm so grievously cautious when it comes down to this is what I saw. I know it, right? I mean, you know, with respect to one of the cases I'm working on now, it's one of the experiencers thought she was taken by entities like aliens, extraterrestrials. And yet the phenomenon had such power over her that what she was internalizing and experiencing around her was completely different than what everyone else was around her. They saw force fields, she saw entities. So we are being deeply manipulated by something. And it's replete. The research is replete with cases of us applying the wrong rules to something that at any time can transcend them. And I mean, like with Ted Rice and other experiencers, and I often mention him because he's a great gentleman. And but you start to see where the mask slips.
Yeah.
And he's not a one-off, matter of fact. I mean, there are other cases out there where it's psychic mediums dealing with guides until they're abducted. And then the abduction's really bad, so they go back to their guides. In some cases, the guides employ revisionist history. They didn't really do that to you. You're going crazy. Or if they did do it to you, they were doing it to you because they were doing it for you. The assault is for your benefit. Or you made a life contract with them. That's why. And now what we're seeing is if it doesn't, and again, I'm dealing with masks, if it doesn't recontextualize the negative experience entirely, there are cases, my friend, where the guides aren't even there anymore. And you start to see that what the phenomenon has done is it's switched hands. Right? Well, okay, I'm going to use one archetype to supersede the other. It's not that they're still in contact with the guides. And it's not even that like the guides aren't saying anything about it, but they're still in contact. No, they're just not there. So in our minds, if our theory is correct, right, we should have both of them communicating with us. Or at the very least, the guide saying, hey, listen, those guys are a hot mess. They shouldn't be doing what they're doing to you. But we're not.
So is this a lose-lose situation for us?
I think that we are evolving and we're catching on to it. With respect to the observer effect, I always wondered how it was that the phenomenon is evolving according to our awareness of it. It's because we were seeing with the wrong eyes. There's something innate within us that is evolving to understand what's going on. And that's a gift and a curse, because if we evolve faster than they want us to, something will come in. And I'll even say this, even researchers whose work has evolved faster than they wanted it to, they're taken out. One of my friends was Paul Eno, the late Paul Eno, and before he passed away, he wrote on Facebook a long post, and I knew him, and he had like kind of he's kind of like all of us, I guess, but more so he believed that some of these beings were parasitic, but some of them are benevolent. But his theory was that we were the reason they were interdimensional is because there are multiple worlds all at once and that kind of thing. But I never heard him talk like this. And then before he died, he posted on Facebook a big, long thread. And his conclusion was that there's something targeting researchers. And that is the truth. You know, if we peddle what they want us to, they'll do anything we want them to do. They may even help.
How do you know you're not under the auspice of one of these entities?
Who, me?
Yeah. Like, do you question that? Do you ever think like maybe?
No. Well, no. I mean, here's why. And this is something that it's not just that I know this to be true personally, but other people who are researching the same stuff are coming to the same conclusions. When I get too close, the phenomenon warns me. I'll get emails from experiencers. Stop this. Like one individual was told by an entity at night, whispered in his ear, don't look at Nathaniel Gillis. Stop looking at what his research is and stop promoting his work. Yeah, absolutely. I had, for the sake of, if you've never heard this, I'll tell you. I was doing research on fetal magic in Mesopotamia as it relates to hybridism and the missing fetus syndrome. And I felt this invasive presence manifest in my office here, literally here. It was heavy. And the only way I can describe it was that whatever I was looking into was looking into me, and it wanted me to know. And so I immediately told my dad. I called my dad. I said, "Okay, I've got to back off. I'm too deep in it. I've got to disconnect." Within a few hours, I think it was, I got two different emails from two different experiencers. Both of them the same email. My guides wanted me to get one. Okay, my guides wanted me to tell you that they will be waiting for you when you die.
I don't even know what to say to that.
Well, that's the phenomenon. That is, I think, and this is some of Jacques Vallée's research too, where there's a control mechanism employed, right? So there's a learning matrix employed by the phenomenon when it adapts to our awareness, right? When we observe it, what we are observing changes. We help the archetype incarnate. There's also a control mechanism employed to where, and I liken it in many cases, I liken it to the Truman Show or the Dark City, where when you start poking around areas they don't want you in,
Right.
you see all of the actors, right? All the archetypes are gone. Now you're dealing with the proto intelligence. No more demons, no more aliens. You're
Did it
dealing with it.
do you think it knew that maybe that was like a fear of yours to be met in the afterlife, and it knew that, and it told one of those experiences to like frighten you with that premise, or like
Well,
where
I am a proponent. Well, I'm a proponent of Nahum Sarna's research. He was a commentarian in the Hebrew Bible. It's fascinating, and he came up with a theory that after so many cases, I guess scriptures, if you will, where patriarchs in Judaism were said to be gathered by their ancestors and sleeping with their fathers at the moment of death. He had instances where some of these patriarchs were not buried with their fathers, literally. And so he said that had to have been an afterlife motif. So that's what I'm aligned with. I believe that when I die, one of my ancestors will come and gather me. Um, so I think I didn't really buy too much into it. Matter of fact, to just be like very transparent with you, it was the presence that was more haunting than the messages.
what did that feel like? What did it feel
Mhm.
like?
Um,
Did it feel
so,
evil,
so
like right away out of the gate?
I've never sat across from a serial killer, but there's an interview with Ted Bundy when Ted Bundy switches on the journalist, where it's no longer, my parents. It's on YouTube. It's no longer like my parents were great people, God fearing. The journalist crossed him, and Ted Bundy came alive, and you see it in his eyes,
Mm.
where if he could at any time, he would snatch you out of yourself. And to be more pointed, what I felt like was it was the same feeling I got when I was a kid,
Mm.
helpless, defeated. It made me feel like just the smallest person in the universe and menacing, like to the point where I had to disconnect myself. And I bought a ticket to Rhode Island and went out there for a week just to find myself. I mean, I know other researchers that have been longer in the field longer than I have, where they're doing the same research I am, specifically in demonology, and their their security companies, home security companies are calling them. We've got something in your house. There's an entity, there's a person in your house. And he's on the phone with him, looking at the camera. Where's it at? It's right behind you. I don't
Oh,
see anything. No, it's there. We don't know what it is, but it alerted us. So yeah, but whatever we're dealing with, um, I think it's extremely dangerous. And people always say, "Well, I've had good experiences." That's great. But I think they say that what the average serial killer only kills 5 people out of the millions he meets.
yeah. Well, that's true. But there has to be goodness on the planet, because you can see it. You know good people. You see good acts of kindness and altruism and stuff. So, do you think that there is that goodness, that it exists, and do you think that it's a way to battle them? So to say?
Yeah. So what I was told years ago from someone who went to the Vatican and talked to their theologians was that we were told the battle was won.
Mhm.
It's not. It's still waging.
Yeah, no, I believe that. It's not one.
And so, right. And so, yeah. So what we're looking at now is the idea that, I mean, okay, let's go this direction for a moment. With respect to the Vatican, it came out with a whole new series of, it's not really new, but I guess they're revised rules for the appearance of an apparition. Like, what does that mean? And I believe 100% that the only reason they would do that is because they're realizing that not everything that appears as an angel is an angel. And one of their categories was Marian apparitions. Not everything that appears as a Marian apparition is in fact a Marian apparition. And so what we're starting to look at now in the phenomenology is that we have angels now appearing to UFO abductees, but it's so simple to see through. If you are who you say you are, you're going to teach what they taught. You're going to believe what they taught. And yet it's not happening. What we're literally seeing, it's the same pathology, my friend, where if that's Uncle Ted, it's going to act like Uncle Ted. He's not, if it's during Edna, it's not literally going to contradict everything that they believed in life. And so these are just avatars, the archetypes that they manifest as. And it seems to be that they only wear that mask up to a certain point, right?
Mhm.
Just like I said, and then the proto-intelligence manifests and you realize, okay, I've been lied to the whole time. I mean, if the Catholic Church has to say that, we've got a problem.
What about Chris Bledsoe? I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with his orbs. I mean,
Yeah.
so the whole thing is demonic then? It's not angelic as he states?
I wouldn't call it demonic. Well, here's where the conversation is, if I may. And I'm kind of, you can't have bad unless you have good too, right? And so you can't have angels unless you have demons. And so what we have here again are people that are trying to control the conversation. And in a way, if they can control the conversation or the question, rather, if they could control the question, they control the answer. And so with respect to Chris Bledsoe, I'm sure he's a great guy. I see nothing to think otherwise. Very sincere. I think his family are good people and everything.
Mhm.
But we're seeing the same pathology present. And even deeper than that, my friend, the same orbs of light that these beings are coming out of, we've seen apparitions, ghosts, Bigfoot, guess what? Demons. And so what we're told to believe is that this is something completely different then. And yet we have cases like Dr. Barry Fitzgerald's case in San Pedro, California, where one of these orbs tried to literally hang Jeff Wheatcraft.
I saw that. Was that the guy in the attic?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what it appears, at least in my perspective, is first I take the micro look, right? Bloody footprints in the snow. Is there any rituals being performed? Anything like that. And then I go to the macro perspective and this is, okay, demons are doing the same things aliens are. Aliens are doing the same things. It's just all there. Then I say, okay, is it possible that whatever we're dealing with is none of the above? And the only traces of any kind of pathology are the sigils they're leaving on people. Like the stuff that we weren't supposed to see, to the extent, my friend, that we only have a few hours or a few days to capture the evidence before the phenomenon goes back and says, oh my God, let me collect this, right? You're not even supposed to see this. That's where we're at. Is this making sense at all?
It absolutely. I'm just trying to keep it so that folks can grasp it as well that are listening. Like I think it's important for folks to be able to understand what we're trying to do here.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about the other side of things, the angelic side, we'll call it.
Mm-hmm.
How can you differentiate then do you believe in spirit guides? Do you believe that you have good spirit guides that help you along in your daily? Do you personally believe that or no?
I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that I just don't. And I'm not, and again, my theory, I'm not saying, okay, I'm right on everything. I reserve the right to be wrong and, evolve in my understanding. Um, but in my experience, the guide usually gives good information, sometimes deadly accurate information. And then there are times, and I've noticed this, it's crazy, but it's almost like they build a foundation of accuracy and then something else will happen. And I'm not talking about, okay, I've got intuition. Oh, I have a good feeling about that guy or that girl. I'll go on a date with that girl. I'm not talking about, I'm talking about actual communication, right? That's when I start looking at it. And it's just because I'm very cautious,
Yeah.
like with respect, like to the guides, like with the case study, the out of body experiencer, right? These are my guides. Well, of course they are. Until they literally wrote sigils into his skin. So I just think it's another archetype in that to those who do have guides have to be exceedingly careful.
So you're saying they could play the good guy and tell you all these great
Absolutely.
things and then come in. So when they okay, so let me ask you this. Have you or do you believe that there have been successful exorcisms that have taken
Mhm.
place where these
Mhm.
demonic entities were purged from a person? Or is that just another archetype manifestation?
Mhm. Well, the thing is, this is what's fascinating. When you get to deal with archetypes, you're dealing with masks. The pathologies are what really tell the stories, I believe. And so, with respect to possession, I believe, and there are cases where the entity will appear. Like, matter of fact, there was one convent, and it's the Franciscan, this is fascinating, a convent of nuns. And one of the nuns is visited in the middle of the night by her favorite priest who was deceased. That's the ghost archetype. Then it starts to give her guidance. There's the guide archetype. And so she was astounded. She didn't say anything to anyone until the next morning at breakfast, and then talks to another nun across the table. To her astonishment, that nun echoes the same experience. My favorite confessor, completely different guy, who's also dead, manifested to me at the same time in the night. Two entities? Not likely. Matter of fact, it started to distribute its consciousness amongst the nuns. Multiple people possessed by the same proto intelligence. So even like what I'm dealing with possession in the sense is like what we're dealing with is not just language preferences, horns and hooves, Malachi Martin, that kind of stuff. And I love Malachi's work. But possession to us is pregnancy to them in the sense that it seems to me like it's a stage of evolution for some of these beings, where if they've been out of body for a long time, they have to be in a new one to realize what it is and start to work at. And so, and this is where it gets into the debug phenomenon, where you literally have women, again, that's the more common sexual typology, was men to women. And the same people that were being possessed by entities, the same thing, sigils, semen, all of that, were actually impregnated by them. So you start to see the sexual evolution of what these beings were truly after. Where, again, some of them can only possess, it seems. Others can actually say, okay, I have a new body. I'm going to keep replicating. And so there does seem to be some kind of an hierarchy there. Or, anyways, I'm rambling and I have ADHD.
No, that makes complete sense. So their end game, if that's their end game, why don't they just take over the entire human race now? Does that have any do we have any power over them in terms of resistance?
So in these experiences, there are two things going on at the same time. Interfacing with them, phenomenon when an incarnate wants to be seen. And so when that archetype manifests, it wants to be believed in. I'm not just appearing as this to you. I want you to believe I am who I am appearing to be. And there is this fight for free will and self-control. They're trying to preserve their own autonomy. And so what usually happens is that they're no longer thinking in front of the entity. They're being thought for in front of the entity. Now the phenomenon is not manifesting to them, it's trying to manifest through them at the same time, to where I'm not just who I'm saying I am, I'm actually influencing your belief in me. And so there is some form of commandeering present. And I think even with CE5, which I guess we got 15 minutes, we'll go there. I mean, I read a case the other day where the CE5, right, again, people think they're the ones doing this. Yeah. It's almost like the phenomenon and right dealing with necronetics and the observer effect, it has to be observed in it to fully incarnate the archetype. Now we're dealing with an intelligence that wants to be seen. Now we have people that want to be witnesses. They want to be the observers to help the phenomenon, you see where I'm going? To incarnate. And at the end of the night, they go home high-fiving saying, see what I did?
Right. Oh, my word. I never thought about it. Why do you think they want to be seen? Do you have any idea?
Absolutely.
I'm trying to piece together their game.
Yeah, so the difference between manifestation and incarnation is this. Manifestation is usually just peripheral. It's usually visual. There's nothing tangible. It's not on a radar. It's not something we can measure or quantify. What I realized, again, when you're looking at these case studies where specifically under balls of light, the experiencer is witnessing something completely different than everybody else's. There's a reason for that. And I believe 100% that it's weaponizing the observer effect. What's happening is that when the phenomenon seeks to be seen, it seeks to be seen so it can hide behind the archetype our consciousness is creating. And what we do by virtue of observation. So what is the observation effect? Okay. When someone observes the phenomenon, the act of observing the phenomenon changes the phenomenon being observed. And so this is why the incubus needs to lock eyes. It's helping itself. Help me create this archetype I'm incarnating. And so it seeks to be seen. It seeks to be witnessed. But we have to understand that by the time we comprehend it, it's changed into the archetype. And thus, my friend, I know it's heavy, thus, my friend, we are co-creators of the manifestation, the incarnation. What that means is it's too late.
Right. I get what you're saying.
It's hiding in plain sight. And now CE5 is not novel. CE5 is the further incarnation of the archetype, because now we have people who want to observe a phenomenon that wants to be
so we're
observed.
helping these things actually manifest.
There we go. Yes. Yeah. At least the archetypes, right?
Right.
And this gets back to, again, the proto-intelligence and the extension. So what that would mean is that even when we're looking at this is necronetics, my theory, even when we're looking at the archetype of the ghost, the demon, the alien, all that, it's the phenomenon is half present. It's half seen, it's half experienced. We're experiencing what it wants us to, and we are actually co-creators of that experience.
Yeah.
This is why, my friend, again, going back to the Warrens, where they're setting up shop, being courted by the proto-intelligence, thinking we've got this, we're good, right? And then in the middle of that co-creating event, the interface is there. These are just human spirits, nothing to worry about. We've seen this before. And that's when the proto-intelligence decided, okay, I'm going to transcend it all. I'm going to show you what this is all about. And my point here is that it's not a one-off. We're seeing that in ufology and demonology. We're seeing that in possession cases.
Yeah.
And if I may finish it with this, at least this point, is when I lectured at the Awakening last February, not this February, last, I presented a theory, and it was on parasitic mimicry, because I believe a lot of the phenomenon is parasitic when it wants to be. And that is the idea that in order for the phenomenon to be co-present with us, it has to diversify its identity in our eyes. It has to make us believe it's less powerful, less in control, right? And so I showed them a picture of the spider-tailed Iranian viper. Have you heard of that?
I've heard of them.
Okay, this will kind of show people what we're dealing with, at least in
Yeah.
necronetics. What this snake did, he's out there in the desert. It's very hot. He realizes all the other predators are sweating it. They're getting thirsty, and they have to suffer to get their prey. What it decided to do was evolve according to the knowledge and awareness of its prey. Check. So what did it eat primarily? It ate birds. But what do birds eat primarily? Spiders.
Mm-hmm.
So the snake, through evolution, created a spider-tipped tail, where the tail itself it's got a hub, right? And then it's got legs. What it does is it hides in the shadows, takes its tail, and flips it, observing itself, self-seeing, flips the tail. It's after the bird. But nobody asked us what the bird was after. It's after the spider. And so you see the incarnation of the archetype manifesting according to what its prey wanted. When the bird sees the spider, it realizes, oh my goodness, I'm hungry. It starts to apply spider rules, spider abilities, and it dive bombs. And by the time it latches onto the spider, and here we go. Remember what I said earlier, the sharing of language with archetypes, singular intelligence. From the tip of the tail and the spider to the head of the snake, there is a sharing of intelligence. Sensation travels all the way up to the proto-mind of the phenomenon, and then you see that snake emerge from the shadows, allowing the bird to believe it was in control, and it's just an archetype, just a spider. I think that's what's happening in many cases.
Yeah, that's a good analogy, but I can't help but wonder, why didn't the bird evolve too, and evolve defenses against this snake that evolved to have a tail like a spider? So, like, what makes that, or what made that snake different, where it had the ability to evolve and the birds
That's a good question.
became victims?
Good question. I don't know. I think it's a fascinating demonstration of what can possibly be going on. I mean, it opens up a can of worms, to be honest with you. But I think it explains a lot with what we're dealing with. I mean, the sharing of intelligence with archetypes, where it transcends all. We thought they're co-present. They're not. One's wearing the other. Anyways, it's fascinating stuff.
Yes, it really is. What defense do we have against this entity, this archetype? Do we have any defense? Are there things we should be doing, not be doing, in your opinion?
What I have heard, what the College Elite did and others that are in aerospace today, is that they went back to religion, or if they were religious, they strengthened their devotions. I do believe iron has an effect. And in addition to that, I think that a part of understanding our defenses is understanding our capabilities and its capabilities. And the only way we can do that is to be honest with it all. We can't, and again, this gets back to the propagation of propaganda. It's just, okay, yeah, I'm going to promote this. And then, like, I had one case study where this guy was watching a TV show and did a rite of provocation on an entity, provocation. And he woke up in the middle of the night with Bell's palsy. Half of his face was paralyzed. And it points back to the theory that a lot of this stuff maybe fabrications. And I could tell you this through experience that sometimes the phenomenon is weaponizing our own ignorance against us.
Mm-hmm.
To the point, my friend, where if people like people think, okay, well, it's a Dybbuk. Oh, it's just a haunted wine box. And
Right.
so everybody goes on telling that story,
Yeah.
right? Meanwhile, the real Dybbuk phenomenon was the impregnation of the dead in the bodies of the living. Literally, that's what it was defined as, which is what we're talking about, right? Necronetics, ghosts, haunt, all that. That's what it was defined as. The impregnation of the dead in the bodies of the living. But that's nowhere in the field, is it? Because, right, again, it's weaponizing our own ignorance against us. Nobody wants to talk about that. And the phenomenon doesn't want us to. When we start to ask those questions, like my friends in England who were studying Mesopotamian demonology, that's when the phenomenon, forget all the masks, that's when it starts to make eye contact with you. And I think it's for a reason. It's because we're close to the source.
So when you get really close to the source, you have to step away. You were saying,
I
Nathaniel,
do.
you have to
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like step off.
Yes. And the people who refuse to step away and have been warned die.
Jeez.
Like, I'm not exaggerating. They die. They'll get in car wrecks.
Goodness.
Yeah. I knew one person who was doing similar research to me. It's been years since I talked to her. But yeah, lost a job, bankruptcy, divorce, pets died. Just stuff that we would think are just natural occurrences, but they were being employed by the phenomenon because it really doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. When that person is making eye contact with that intelligence, both of them know what's going on. It's like being at
So
a
you don't,
restaurant. It's like, yeah, I wink at you. We both know you
yeah.
shouldn't be doing what you're doing. Yeah.
You don't think that you could be manifesting these things yourself?
No. So I think that we manifest many of the archetypes the phenomenon uses. But I don't believe that people are psychosomatic and subconsciously manifesting Egyptian hieroglyphs from underneath the skin to the surface. I wish that was the case, right? That would be incredible because then we would kind of go in a different direction with this, but no. And I've seen some of the psychosomatic symptoms, and they are mindless, unguided, right? You see some scratches, but literally nothing where it's even that. It's a whole different dimension where, the language and the sigils themselves are gender specific. That's hard to create when you have somebody who doesn't even have any background
Yeah.
in the occult.
Now, I appreciate the time today, and I would love to have you come back because I literally have like 2 pages of questions that I didn't get to. But
That's
before you
fine.
go, and again, I totally appreciate your time. What do you
Mhm.
think of folks that experience, NDEs?
Mhm.
Are they
Well,
legit, or are they like what's happening there?
I'm still researching that. I haven't come to a direct conclusion because I've met people that have impressive NDEs and
Yeah,
it's
talk
irrefutable.
with
It's
them too.
like, yeah,
Yeah,
like, I knew a lady that she had a really bad accident, died, and her deceased father told her that she needed to return for her boys, but she didn't have her twin boys for another decade. So there's stuff out there.
yeah.
I guess my concern would be we've seen them impersonate the dead here. What makes us think they're not gonna do it there? So it's hard.
Yeah. So you're saying that could all be an illusion, a masking of what they're doing, but then why bring you
Could
back?
be.
I
Right,
don't know. So
right.
it gets
I'm
really,
with you there.
it's really hairy. So what's, in closing, what are you working on now? And what do you hope
Mhm.
to achieve by sharing all of this knowledge with the general public? Is it for an awakening for them, an awareness? Like
Mhm.
what's your end game?
Well, I wanna contribute.
Yeah.
I have a deep passion for this research, and I've met adults I've met men that went through the very same thing I did as a child, and I've watched them be reduced to tears at
Mm,
talking about it. When I'm looking at a 60-year-old CEO or a 40-year-old executive, successful, happy marriage, right? Good credit, just an all around good. It, but none of that matters. When we talk about it, they are reduced to the little boy they have always been, trapped within just a self perpetuating traumatic experience. That's the person that I want to talk to and at least provide context to what's going on. So my goal though is to get a PhD in this.
mhm.
Not that I want to be like a demonologist, but like I want to have credentials behind me so I can have discussions with people and it's not just old Nate.
Now that sounds very impressive. It really does.
Thank you.
It does, and I love the scholarly approach to it. I appreciate that. And and the reason why I wanted to interview you too, because I think it's important for folks to have that seed of information so that they
Mhm.
can kind of mull it over and think about maybe they're having experiences similar to yours, and
Right.
they need some understanding of what happened to them as well. But thank you so
Yes.
much, Daniel. I greatly
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. And I can't, I'm going to definitely be in touch via email because I would love to do a part two. Like I said, I have
Yeah.
so many questions, but so if you
Okay.
could let me say goodbye, stick around for 30 seconds. All right, dear.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you, Nathaniel. Okay, folks. So thank you so much. That was a lot to swallow. I know. If you need to replay it, please by all means do so. Um, I'm going to be having Nathaniel back, and hopefully, we'll get some of your questions and be able to clarify any confusion. And again, he's kind of really good at summarizing things and explaining what his beliefs are. And again, if you have any questions, just please feel free to leave them below. But thank you so much for joining us today. And again, we're airing live on the United Public Radio Network, and some of our shows are pre-recorded as well. So we thank you so much for being able to attend and watch them. And that is again on the United Paranormal Radio Network on 105.3 on the Gulf Coast, 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and all over social media, Rumble, every platform you can think of. So if you can subscribe and give us a thumbs up and a like, I would greatly appreciate that. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Please be sure and check out Nathaniel's website as well. We have all those links and information. He's got books coming out too. And we're going to be talking about all that good stuff in part two. So thank you all so much again. Take care and have a safe and wonderful rest of your day.